Hey guys, it's Fluent Pilot again. It's great to be back and to be able to share some useful stuff with you. Particularly, more picture description videos are on the way, but today I suggest that we should talk about getting ready for that part of your aviation English exam where you answer interview questions. I couldn't help noticing that many of my students, no matter what aviation English tests they are preparing themselves for, experience difficulties with even starting their answers to so-called aviation-related questions. Like, for example, what can suspend airport operations? Define TCAS. What are major factors for CFIT accidents? Or how can pilots avoid fatigue? And so on. And the problem is not just in the fact that students don't know what to say, because I'm sure that since you are an aviation professional, you definitely can answer in your native language what TCAS is or how fatigue can be avoided. Opening line in English without too big a pause, that turns out to be a real stumbling block. So here are a few tips that you might find useful. Pick the key term in the question and start your answer by defining it. It doesn't have to be an official ICAO definition. Use your own words and make it simple. Mind that all aviation terms that may possibly pop up during the exam can be split into several simple categories. There are really not many of them, so don't get scared. Finally, use a subordinate clause in your opening sentence to make your task even simpler. Take a look at a few examples now. Let's call the first category a situation. There are really lots of aviation terms that you can start defining by saying, "It is a situation when," or "It is a situation which." Let's imagine you've been asked, what could be the reasons for fuel starvation? The key term here is fuel starvation. So start with a simple definition like, it is a situation when the fuel is not supplied to the aircraft engines, and which eventually leads to engine flameout. And then you'd go on to say something like, there are many reasons that can cause that, for example, fuel system malfunction or fuel contamination inside the tanks, and so on. Let's take a look at another example. How can bird strikes be prevented? In this case, you could probably go like this. A bird strike is a situation when a bird or a flock of birds hits the aircraft during the takeoff or landing roll, initial climb or approach. And then continue saying, for example, so there are several techniques that pilots might use to avoid it, and so on. Similarly, a ton of questions falls under this category. What actions should be taken in case of pilot incapacitation? Pilot incapacitation is a situation when someone on the flight crew becomes unable to perform duties due to health problems. How does jet lag influence passenger and pilot behavior? Jet lag is a situation when a pilot or a passenger feels discomfort or tiredness and poor sleep after a long travel across several time zones. What is a bomb scare? It is a situation when an aircraft is reported to have a bomb or an explosive device on board. Okay, let's move on to the next category. We'll call it a piece or a part of equipment. And it also covers a great many of aviation terms that you might be asked to describe, like TCAS, EGPWS, weather radar, data link, etc. Use the subordinate clause to specify where it is installed or what it is used for, by whom it is used, or what it consists of. Let's say you hear a question like, what situations in flight might force pilots to use ram air turbine? Well, ram air turbine is a piece of onboard equipment which is installed in the low part of the fuselage and which is used to generate electric power when no other power source is available. It consists of, and so on. Or, what does PAPI stand for? PAPI is a precision approach path indicator, and it is a part of airfield equipment which includes a set of white and red lights located beside the runway. It is used to help pilots identify a correct glide slope during approach. The next category will be about a phenomenon, and as you can guess, it will embrace mostly weather-related terms. So use this definition pattern to talk about, say, St. Elmo's fire, or wind shears, or microbursts, fogs, tornadoes. For example, imagine you have to deal with a question like, why is it crucial to avoid thunderstorms? An easy way to start an answer is simply to say that thunderstorm is a weather phenomenon which occurs in CB clouds and is usually accompanied by heavy rain, hail, severe turbulence, icing conditions, and lightning. Or how can clear air turbulence affect flight operations? Well, clear air turbulence is a weather phenomenon when large streams of air move at great speeds at high altitudes. Finally, let's point out the category called procedure or maneuver. Again, a great many of aviation-related questions are about some procedures or maneuvers, like holding patterns or fuel dumping, belly landing, go-rounds or touch-and-goes, or rerouting or baggage identification, and so on. As agreed, you give an explanation of the term itself by using a subordinate clause and specifying, for instance, what this procedure is used for, or in what situations, or what steps it contains. Let's say you need to answer a question like, when do aircraft need to go through the anti-icing procedure? Your answer in this case could start from something like, anti-icing is a procedure which is performed before departure when the aircraft gets sprayed with anti-icing fluid, in order to prevent ice accumulation during taxiing and takeoff roll. And then you could continue by saying something smart about weather conditions that will require such a procedure and probably about de-icing before anti-icing and whatnot really. This particular topic is huge. Talk about holdover time, types of anti-icing fluid, or the physics of the accumulation in general. Okay, let's take a look at one more example. Why would a pilot need to perform an emergency descent? Emergency descent is a maneuver which requires that the aircraft descends as rapidly as possible to a safe altitude or to the ground for an emergency landing. And then go on to enumerate the reasons for this maneuver like fire, depressurization, and so on. Okay, let's sum it up. In your opening phrase, define the key term from the question. Use subordinate clause to facilitate the task. Set categories for yourself like situation, weather phenomenon, piece of equipment, or maneuver. This will certainly help make this process less chaotic in your head. Keep in mind though that all this is just about the opening phrase. The recommendations are aimed at preventing you from losing precious time when starting your answer to an interview question. But you still have to think the topic through and actually know what you're talking about. Okay, let's call it a day. Thanks for watching. Feel free to comment if you have something to say. And we'd appreciate, guys, if you shared the video with your friends and colleagues. Alright, see you next time. Cheers.